So cool. So cool. Okay, we got a good question from the audience. So do you necessarily mean public goods as in charity activities, or just mean broadly as a benefit to a large group of people?
So charity activities I would define as like being creating benefits to other people for altruistic reasons. Like you're not being incentivized to do it. You're just like doing it out of the kindness of your heart, or just like, you get some feeling of passion from like being able to do something meaningful in the world. And that is like, and actually, that doesn't even necessarily that doesn't only motivate public goods, right? So, like for example, holding the door for someone, like that's a totally private good. Like it's a service that benefits exactly one person. But at the same time, like that's an act of kindness. Like you could even say an act of charity that people do every day. But at the same time, there are also public goods that get produced incidentally. Like, for example, there's like Facebook, they do a whole bunch of centralized stuff, but sometimes they decide that like it's important enough to create tooling for centralized stuff that they create all their own tooling, and then they open source their tooling. And so, I think like React.js got created that way, right? So like basically like they do create public goods as a kind of byproduct of their like generally private good oriented activity. So that's something that happens too. And then another thing that happens too is people just create public goods because they're paid to do them, right? Like if you are like a worker working on building a road because the government pays you to do it, right? Like you're not necessarily being charitable, it's a job, you're being paid. You could be passionate about roads and have a kind of ethic of like the public service that you're doing, or you might not be, and you might be just like there to get the money. But you're also creating a public good. So I guess you do need to make the distinction between like what the motivations are of the people that are doing the thing versus kind of the privateness versus publicness of the thing that is being created.
Yeah. And by the way, one thing that Vitalik talked about a little bit earlier was that we are trying to like kind of give a business model to the public good. So what that is actually doing is it is reducing the amount of charity driven public goods and increasing, well, maybe not reducing it, but at least it's increasing the amount of non-charity driven public goods. And so this is clearly benefiting all of us, but it is, it's not about charity. It's really, it's really about paying people for the value that they're creating and creating that really virtuous cycle.
I think sometimes it's a mix, right? So like, for example, there's a lot of people who are perfectly happy to take extreme pay cuts to work on things that are in the public interest, but they're not quite willing to take 100% pay cuts, right? Like they need just enough funding that they can feel like it's a comfortable job, right? And so like there are totally people who like, if there is no public goods funding at all, they'll just say, well, they might work on an open source thing for a couple of months and they'll say, well, screw this. The guys that are shilling scam coins are earning $25 million off an ICO, so I'm going to go shill a scam coin. But if you just crank up the public goods funding a little bit, then you can crank it up to the level where like these kind of not infinitely altruistic but still altruistic people actually end up being empowered to actually have the opportunity to work on the public goods that they've always been more passionate about doing.